Termessos, near Antalya in southern Turkey, is one of the best preserved ancient cities anywhere in the Mediterranean world. Remote and inaccessible, it began as a stronghold of the Pisidians. It defied Alexander when he came this way, but with time, it joined the civilization that Alexander created, becoming Greek and eventually Roman. Termessos seems to have derived its wealth from olive groves and from tolls levied on the road leading from Lycia down to the coast. The city allied itself with the Romans early. In fact, its calendar began with the year 70 BC, when the alliance was concluded. It flourished in the imperial era, when most of its existing buildings were constructed. But in late antiquity, for reasons not well understood, the city was abandoned. Preserved from stone robbing by their remote location, the ruins have remained almost untouched for 16 centuries. Let's explore. The mountain valley in which Termessos was built was protected by 2 lines of walls. This is one of them. You can see why Alexander had second thoughts. This is the propylon of Hadrian, which led into a small temple. Almost everything else has collapsed thanks to earthquakes. We can see scattered around all the blocks and columns. But this in itself is remarkable, since almost anywhere else in the classical world, all this stone would have been scavenged long ago. The Bath-gymnasium is in pretty good condition after 16 centuries of neglect. Like many examples in Asia Minor, it was a combination of a Roman bath and a Greek-style gymnasium. Here, we're in the gymnasium section. Let's clamber in for a better look. Try not to drop the gimbal. And now we're looking toward the bath section. The bathing block is still preserved to almost its entire height. As you can see at the end of one of the vaults here, with a decorative door and window. Let's do a bit of hands-on exploration of the bathing block. Bear with me. As you can see, the vaults have collapsed, but the walls are still largely intact. Let's head over this way. The nice thing about Termessos is it's still a choose-your-own-adventure sort of site, which means you can fall into a pit, but it's also very far from tour group land. Nice ambiance, all the ivy overgrowing the walls here. Until the next earthquake. Another picturesque section of the baths. In Rome, this would all be made out of brick and concrete, but up here, everything is cut and dressed stone. Heading inside. In many places, the ruins have come to resemble natural cliffs, as though all that gray stone had been there forever. This was a colonnaded street, built in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Earthquakes have felled the stoas that lined it, but we can still see many of the statue bases that stood along those colonnades. Every statue was set up to honor a citizen of Termessos, sometimes a benefactor who had made a generous donation to the city, sometimes a local athlete who had prevailed in the contest, sometimes a priest or official. All the statues are gone, but the effect of those glittering bronze images can still be imagined. This is the end of the colonnaded street. You can see here, in tumbled profusion, statue bases columns, bits of architrave, and miscellaneous blocks. As so often in Termessos, this is a ruin with a view. One more section of the colonnaded street with a fine double statue base here in the center. You can see how tall these are. I'm holding the camera at eye level, so the statues would have stood, well, between 8 and about 15 feet up. The Agora, the heart of ancient Termessos, was roughly trapezoidal in shape. It was bounded by 2-story stoas. This one was built by Osbarus, a prominent citizen in the early Roman imperial era. Another stoa was built about 3 centuries before by King Attalus II, an illustration of the fact that classical agoras tended to evolve gradually over the centuries. The agora was used to the end of Termessos' life. Around the beginning of the 5th century AD, rough walls made of spolia were built around it. There are 5 cavernous cisterns beneath the agora, each about 25 feet deep. And here we can gaze down into the abyss. Beyond the row of cistern mouths are the remains of a hieron, a monumental tomb, in which some very prominent citizen was buried. Let's walk up there now. Often, heroa were built for the founder of a city, the ktistes. That may have been the case here, but we just don't know. As you can see, it's partly carved from stone and partly built. Let me do a bit of clambering here. And here, a majestic view of mostly scrub. Near the Agora is the so-called House of the Benefactor, a Roman-era mansion with a main door almost 20 feet tall. Beyond, in front of us, was the atrium with the usual impluvium, but the rest of the plan is hard to make out thanks to the very dense undergrowth. This is the bouleuterion, where the city council met. I'm going to pick my way over the rubble to the main entrance, and we'll head inside. Sneak preview, but only this door over here is accessible. The walls are preserved almost to their original height, which is pretty remarkable. You can see up there we have engaged pilasters in masonry. Impress your friends. And now we will squeeze beneath this door. Voila. So we're walking on top of rubble, beneath which were the seats on which the city council sat. It would have had a wooden roof, which of course has long since vanished, and was used from the late Hellenistic period, when it was built, till the end of the city's life. The theater dates to the Roman era in its present incarnation. It was relatively small, with only about 4,000 seats, but it was, and is, one of the most impressively situated buildings anywhere in Termessos. The stage building, once lavishly decorated, has collapsed, but the view of the valley beyond is still awe-inspiring. A view from the side of the stage building, and here, where a bit of the cavea has collapsed, we have a view down toward Antalya and the sea. You can see how lavish the stage building was from these fragments of spiraled columns and architrave. Near the ruins of the bouleuterion are the remains of several small temples. This is the best preserved of them. It was likely dedicated to either Zeus or Artemis, but we aren't sure which. It has unfortunately acquired quite a few modern inscriptions, but there's an ancient one here honoring a benefactor. Let's crash through the undergrowth here to another temple. Not quite as well preserved, unfortunately, just a sea of stones. But that in itself is remarkable. Anywhere on the plain, these have been robbed long ago. The ruins of one more temple, Ionic, apparently, with just the doorpost left standing. But between them, an awe-inspiring view of the sea and the sprawl of Antalya. By one corner of the Agora are the remains of a small Corinthian temple. Let's take a look. It's be a bit of a clamber here, but we'll get up. Very picturesque. Okay. I have heaved myself up. And can now confirm that that was in no way worth it. But hey, the views aren't bad. The necropolis of Termessos are enormous, literally hundreds of gargantuan stone sarcophagi jumbled in heaps by earthquakes and landslides. Many coffins bear this device, the shield of Termessos, a sigil. There's the shield again. All the tombs were robbed long ago, which helps to account for their disarray. The lids were thrown off and lie where the thieves left them. Let's pick our way over this heap and try and get a better view of the whole section of this necropolis. You see how many of the coffin lids had acroteria, like miniature temples. It goes on and on. This one's quite well preserved. And beyond it, there are hundreds more. On this side of the sarcophagus, we have the inscription, and many of these inscriptions, by the way, will indicate the fines which anyone who disturbed the tomb would have to pay to the treasury of Zeus. Somehow I doubt, however, that the guy who smashed through the sarcophagus to rob the burial bothered to pay anything. Here you see the inclined bit of rock on which the corpse's head rested. Turning, we see, you guessed it, more sarcophagi. Let's take a gander at a few more, since we're here. The shield again. Quite a few of these bushes I'm crashing through have thorns, I am being reminded. Yet more. You can see from here just how big the necropolis is. All those gray lumps among the scrub are sarcophagi. And that concludes our all too brief tour of Termessos. If you are anywhere in this part of Turkey, I highly recommend a visit. Bring lots of water, watch your step, and enjoy.